If you enjoy this video and would like to hear more of my stories, please click like and subscribe to be notified of when I release a new story. Everyone rates the Sunderland mob, the Seaburn casuals. When football hooliganism was in its heyday, so were the Seaburn casuals. Everyone has a story about this crew and everyone rates them. So, in this video we are going to explore their history and origins and the fierce northeast rivalry with Newcastle. This fierce derby has seen some of the most violent hooligan clashes in England. We are going to look at factual witness account, media account, and hear from some football casuals that have been involved in brutal battles between the rivals. Let's start with the origins and formation of the Seaburn Casuals. Seaburn Casuals are a football hooligan firm associated with the English football club Sunderland AFC. The group's activity was prominent in the 90s and the early 2000s, with the club being involved in some of the most violent incidents in British hooligan history, in what was described as some of the worst football-related fighting ever witnessed in the United Kingdom, and sometimes topping the football arrest table. While early hooligan firms of Sunderland fans appeared as far back as the 70s and the 80s, like the Voxies, named after the Vos breweries, who were active in the late 70s and early 80s, the most famous hooligan firm is the Seaburn Casuals, named after the Seaburn area near Roker Park Stadium. The Seaburn Casuals took over the Everton pub called the Blue House for several hours in 1984. They also had a strong rivalry with the Nottingham Forest FC firm due to its links with the Newcastle United firm. A few days before a game in 1994, police snatched a pile of weapons, drugs worth thousands of pounds, and were preparing for a showdown with Nottingham hooligans. Before the 1998 FIFA World Cup, 26 Seaburn Casuals hooligans were arrested in a police raid after a military-issue smoke bomb was let out at a local pub after a fight with bouncers. By the end of the operation, over 60 were facing charges. Some of the Seaburn Casuals hooligans picked up in the raid were also involved with neo-Nazi groups like Combat 18. The operation failed when the judge ruled CCTV footage from the pub inadmissible. Sunderland AFC used to be noted for football hooliganism. At the end of the 1999-2000 season, Sunderland topped the hooliganism table in the Premier League, with 223 fans arrested that season. Now, let's have a look at incidents between the Seaburn Casuals and the Newcastle Gremlins. The Seaburn Casuals were essentially a group of very passionate fans who got together and ended up clashing with other groups of fans, sometimes violently. In particular, the clash with their Tyneside counterpart, the Newcastle Gremlins. In the year 2002, they engaged in a battle with the Gremlins at a place known as Ferry Mews, which was described by authorities as being like a scene from Braveheart, which included the use of weapons. Unfortunately, one man suffered permanent brain damage. In that same season of 2002, the Casuals clashed again with Newcastle Gremlins outside of an England international football game hosted at the Stadium of Light, with the Lions playing Turkey. This resulted in Sunderland getting the infamous distinction of having the most football arrests that season, standing at 154, a figure which was likely only made worse by the club's poor performance on the pitch. Over the years, other rows the Casuals got themselves caught up in involved invading Tottenham Hotspur's pitch in the 1980s, occupying an Everton pub called the Blue House, as well as a battle over the Fulwell end of Roker Park with Newcastle fans in 1985. They also held a bitter feud with the fans of Nottingham Forest, another city, of course, where an economic downturn led to a notorious hooligan culture. And in 1994 police intercepted them and confiscated weapons and drugs. In March 2002, the Seaburn Casuals fought with hooligans from the Newcastle Gremlins in a pre-arranged clash near the North Shields ferry terminal, in what was described as some of the worst football-related fighting ever witnessed in the United Kingdom. The leaders of the Gremlins and Casuals were both jailed for 4 years for conspiracy, with 28 others jailed for various terms, based on evidence gained after police examined the messages sent by mobile phone between the gang members on the day. It was later referred to as one of the region's most notorious moments of football madness. On 2nd of April 2003, about 95 fans were arrested when around 200 fans of Sunderland and Newcastle clashed in Sunderland city centre before an England UEFA Euro 2004 qualifying match against Turkey in the city. The fans then attacked the police, pelting them with missiles including bottles, cans and wheel trims. Some sources attributed these clashes to a resurgence in the conflict between the Gremlins and Seaburn casuals. In 2011, bans from football games, community service hours and fines were given to a bunch of Seaburn casuals, ringleaders, instigators and participants who took part in 2009 clash between the Seaburn casuals and Newcastle fans. While the police managed to detain Newcastle fans who were ambushing the arriving trains of Sunderland fans at the central station, they struggled to contain the Sunderland fans who arrived later. By the time of the present day, it is arguable whether the Seaburn casuals still exist. This is because the young men of today do not live in the same socio-economic conditions as the 1980s, with skinhead culture being a thing of the past. Although fights at football games is still common sometimes, such as the scenes before Sunderland's game with Middlesbrough in October 2023, violence is now increasingly frowned upon by a lot more fans, and the rise of social media and internet news means the consequences of bad behaviour are far lasting. Newcastle and Sunderland fans have been involved in their fair share of violent clashes over the years, but one incident in 1987 lives long in the memory of one Sunderland hooligan. Now let's hear from Seaburn casual Frank Wheatley with some first-hand actual experience of going toe-to-toe with the Gremlins. This is what he had to say in his own words. The bitter rivals have clashed for years, and Sunderland hooligan Frank Wheatley recalled one particularly violent clash in 1987. Wheatley, speaking in the book Terrace Legends, recalls saving the life of a Newcastle fan, just to be told to F off. Like on Saturday, the game was a midday kick-off, and fans had been drinking since the clash of dawn. He said, "A pub had opened up for us at 5:30 in the morning for a midday kick-off. Around the back of the bus station appeared a mob, and a few of our lads came running towards us shouting, 'They're here.' Wheatley had been relieving himself against a wall when objects started to rain down on him. He continued, 'It was toe-to-toe, and next to me were two lads on the floor and they were getting a good kicking from our lads. One got up and ran and the other was still getting a good seeing too. Leave him, he's had enough,' I told the two blokes dishing out the beating. I picked him up and asked if he was all right. 'Aye,' he said, 'I'll wait for me mob here. Your firm's gone, mate. They've run and left you,' I told him. 'Don't be fucking daft. We don't run from no one,' he said. 'Mate, I've just saved your life,' I told him. 'F off,' he said with plenty of attitude. Wheatley shoved him back on the floor and gave him another good kicking. He added, 'That day was the worst violence I'd ever seen between us. It was a mob fighting a mob toe to toe. There was even people getting their heads put through windows, and it must have been a good half hour before the police regained control.' Here is an article from the Chronicle about a violent clash between the casuals and the Gremlins. City centre revellers were left terrified when they were caught up in violent clashes between rival Sunderland and Newcastle football thugs. Pitched battles broke out in the Centurion Bar in Newcastle's central station between gangs of hooligans as Sunderland fans returned from a friendly match with Hibs in Edinburgh. Police were waiting to escort the fans off the train and to the metro, but members of the Newcastle United gang, known as the Gremlins, were waiting for the supporters outside the Centurion at around 9 p.m. on Saturday night. Manager of the Centurion, Tracy Vycrek, was working on Saturday night. She said, "We didn't get any advance warning. The first I knew about it was when I asked why there were so many police outside the bar. They said a train was due in at 9 p.m. with Sunderland fans on it. We saw them get off the train, but a group of Gremlins were waiting for them and began shouting and swearing at them." The police tried to get the Sunderland fans around the side and into the metro, but you could see they were winding each other up and were just dying to get at each other like a pack of animals. They managed to break free and the two groups went at each other right in the middle of the pub. It was terrifying. The pub was crowded with about 400 punters, and these yobs just began flying at each other. Glasses were going everywhere and they were using bar stools to smash things up. It was absolute mayhem. We had young staff who'd never dealt with anything like this before. There was one couple who had been waiting to pick their daughter up from the train. She was so traumatised that we let her and her parents stay in the snug until everything calmed down. Tracy closed the bar at 9:20 p.m. and began clearing up all of the smashed glasses and bottles. The bar was reopened again for the remainder of the night about half an hour later. But Tracy is furious. They were given no advance warning about the fans arriving on the train. She said, "Normally, we are given plenty of notice when there are going to be clashes like this, and we close one side of the bar and get in extra doormen. We are a football pub and nothing like this has ever happened here before." Jason Sanderson also manages the bar. He said, "I wasn't working, but I went around the other bars to see what they knew. Apparently the manager of the lounge said he had been told there was going to be a fight, but they were hoping to contain it to the Centurion. We're just furious that we weren't told." British Transport Police estimate up to 150 people were involved in the fighting. 4 people from Sunderland and South Shields have been arrested in connection with the brawl for public order and criminal damages offence. Taunting messages were posted on football hooligan websites just hours after the violence flared. One, posted on the Sunderland Seaburn casual site on Saturday night, wrote, "What a day, what a turnout. If Sunderland can get numbers like that more often, then no one can touch us. Keep it up, lads. This was a great day with SAFC untouchable off the pitch." Another, from a Seaburn lad, read, "We showed the gremlin bottle throwers how to break police cordons and showed them up in their own backyard. Their plan backfired and the gremlins ran, and as far as I know, are still running." A Northumbria police spokesman said, "We can confirm 4 people were arrested after a disturbance on Saturday night and have been bailed pending further inquiries. But now, I want to explore why such an intense hatred exists between Sunderland and Newcastle. So, I am going to try and explain the actual factual history of the two. If I am wrong or have missed anything, please let me know in the comment section. Here goes. The feud between the two cities dates to the English Civil War, when Newcastle stayed loyal to the Crown and Sunderland joined the Parliamentary Rebellion. In the 1600s, King Charles was granted East of England coal trade rights to Newcastle's merchants. This decision ended up crippling the people of Sunderland. When civil war broke out, it was inevitable they would be on opposing sides, culminating in the Battle of Bolden Hill, a war between the Loyalist army from Newcastle and County Durham against an anti-monarchist Sunderland and Scottish army. Newcastle lost, and the city was colonised by an army from Scotland, which had been supported by troops from Sunderland. This bloody conflict is generally regarded as the moment the rivalry between two neighbouring towns turned hostile. Some of the great derbies are rather based on the difference between the two sets of fans, particularly the classes. For example, Lyon v Saint-Étienne was formed on Saint-Étienne's blue-collar working class against Lyon's white-collar admin workers. But over time this reasoning for a derby soon fades away, as it isn't as deep and meaningful. The Tyne-Wear derby is in our top 10 rivalries in the UK, due to the short regional conflict shared between the two teams, particularly when it preludes football by 226 years. A conflict that has divided Sunderland and Newcastle for more than 3 centuries, unlike most other rivalries. The difference between the both clubs dates back to fighting based on the need to live and feed each other's families and benefit city living. It holds a very similar meaning to the Old Firm derby, in the sense as it goes beyond work classes, it's religion. Celtic's origins firmly embedded in Irish Catholicism, and Rangers' origins firmly embedded in Protestant beliefs, the divide known as sectarianism, which has engulfed Scotland for years in a war leading to many deaths from both sides. Another reason why this rivalry is so fierce and tensions are so high is that in the 1600s, King Charles I had consistently awarded the East of England coal trade rights to Newcastle's traders, making the Wareside coal merchants redundant. This decision led to many people dying because of it. The coal and ships industry were Sunderland's raison d'etre. Another major part of history which involved both sides clashing again was in 1642, when the English Civil War started, and Newcastle, with good reason, supported the Crown. Sunderland, however, due to the trading inequalities, sided with Cromwell's parliamentarians, and the separation began. It became a conflict between Sunderland's socialist republicanism against Newcastle's loyalist self-interest. It was an event where over 70 Sunderland and Newcastle hooligans took part in what is condemned to be one of the worst related football violence incidents ever in Britain. The sides weren't even playing each other, as Sunderland were playing at home to Middlesbrough, and, for safety reasons, Newcastle were scheduled to play away. However, on a Tyneside street called Ferry Mews, over 70 fans who were seen to be your fathers, uncles and brothers met with knives, bricks and bats. The fighting lasted around 5 minutes at North Shields passenger ferry landing point. The two groups named the Seaburn Casuals and the Newcastle Gremlins. Weapons were left lying around, pools of blood were visible, and one man was permanently brain damaged. Kingsley Highland OBE, a special casework lawyer for the Crown Prosecution Service, stated, "It was violence and disorder on a massive scale." At the resulting trial, the jury heard it compared to a scene from the film Braveheart. Many of those who were involved were respectable figures in the public. Among them was a former Royal Navy diver, a soldier and a tax inspector. Some of the men involved weren't even from the Tyneside area, as many had also travelled from Manchester to side with the Seaburn Casuals, Sunderland. However, other men present had previous convictions for football-related violence with club and country, a fierce reputation at England matches, and several of the men were well known to police spotters, officers who are known to film troublemakers at football grounds across the country. One man suffered brain damage from the incident, and dozens were arrested while police tried to identify the ringleaders of this pre-arranged fight, after seizing the mobile phones of the fans arrested, getting off the ferry at South Shields. As it stands in the Tyne-Wear derby, Sunderland have seen the most success with 54 wins and 49 draws to Newcastle's 53 wins. Their first meeting was on the 24th of December 1898, where Newcastle won 3-2 in a game played at Roker Park in front of around 25,000 fans in the English Division 1. Their most recent fixture was on the 8th of January 2019, where Sunderland won 4-0 in a game played at the Stadium of Light in front of 16,654 fans in the Football League Trophy third round, which involved Sunderland's first team and Newcastle's under-23s, a rule for all Premiership and Championship clubs competing. This was the closest both teams got to a Tyne-Wear derby, with the last time both teams playing against each other being on the 20th of March 2016 in the Premier League. The game ended 1-1. However, the tension could still be felt when most Newcastle fans tried to sell out the whole stadium. However, due to the limited allocation given from Sunderland, this couldn't be done. It was a must-win for both teams. Even if it involved Newcastle's under-21s, it was just as important as a first-team clash. And Newcastle fans wouldn't have let it go if they were victors. An even more sweet sight if their youngsters had managed to overturn an experienced Sunderland side. However, the experience seemed to be the deciding factor, as the home side were comfortable winners, winning 4-0. The Tyne-Wear's top goal scorer is Sunderland's George Holly, an inside forward who spent much of his career at the Black Cats, helping them claim the Football League title in 1913. In the same year, he also helped them get to the FA Cup final, seeing defeat to Aston Villa after losing 1-0. The largest victory from a side in a Tyne-Wear derby was back in 1908, when Sunderland won 9-1 the exact season when Newcastle won the league, making Sunderland's win a little better for Sunderland fans after seeing their rivals go on to clinch the title. Here is another article that describes more violence between Sunderland and Newcastle and offers a different perspective. Police have made 2 further arrests after yesterday's football riots in Newcastle to take the number to 29 and revealed that a horse punched by a fan appears fine today. The blow caused Bud, the West Yorkshire police horse, to rear up in pain, almost throwing its rider to the ground. Following concern for his health, the force released 2 pictures of Bud in his paddock this morning. The attack happened in scenes reminiscent of the dark days of football riots in England in the 1970s and 80s. Fans clashed with police and each other. More than 100 Newcastle supporters rampaged through the streets after their team lost 3-0 to Sunderland at St James Park. In a regular briefing at Westminster, the Prime Minister's spokesman said David Cameron thought the violence was deplorable. The spokesman said he shares entirely Sports Minister Hugh Robertson's view on this, which is the violence which involved a minority of so-called fans is deplorable. I think it is very important that the police and the FA are conducting a full investigation. That's absolutely the right thing to do. The scenes that we saw at the weekend have no place whatsoever in the game. Today it also emerged that even before the riots, a disabled fan was left with burns after a flare was thrown from an upper tier of the stadium. Carl McVeigh was enjoying the match with his father when he was hit and left with burns to his upper right arm after being pelted with a flare by Sunderland fans. Sunderland lads are not going to be happy about this, but to make this video as balanced as possible, we are now going to hear from actual Newcastle hooligans, Mark Menim, Steve Wraith and Stuart Wheatman, on what they think about the Seaburn casuals and true accounts of their battles. There are 2 sides to every story, so I'm going to read out some of the book. From the Bender Squad to the Gremlins, inside Newcastle's football hooligan firm. This is what the Newcastle lads had to say in their book. Make no bones about it, we hate those see you next Tuesdays with a passion. Scum of the earth and always in our shadows. Come to think of it, they aren't very fond of us either. It's not just a football thing with us. We are brought up to hate them. I've been abroad on holiday with my ex, and I've spat in their faces. I've kicked a toilet door in to get to one of them while he was having a shite, knocking him out in the process, and I've even set on fire one of the inbred's red and white top on fire at the races. And yes, he was wearing it. I used to ban them from the pubs I ran because I didn't want them in. I remember my first days at the Queen's pub in Sheriff Hill, and a Mackem came in and started talking to me. I stopped him in mid-sentence and took him to the front door of the pub and asked him why the hell he supports that shite when you could see St James Park from his local pub's doorway. He couldn't answer me, so I told him not to come back, and I put up a sign barring all Mackems. It was a Wednesday night, sometime in the 70s. A few of our lads decided to go on the train with the Bender Squad. They were all dressed in jeans, donkey jackets, and steel toe-capped boots. Central Station was full of older lads, and true to their name they'd all had a good drink. They were all singing songs banging on the windows and luggage racks. Some of them had scarves tied around their arms. There was piss trickling along the floor as they arrived at Seaburn Station. The atmosphere was mental. Something big was building, and they were looking forward to what might happen as they walking along the streets on the way to Roker Park. Anyone in their way got it. It didn't matter who they were. If they wasn't with our lads, then they was against them. They made it down to a couple of bars just off the Wearmouth Bridge, and their boys were waiting, and it went off big style. One of the younger lads just stood back in amazement as he watched the others go to work. He didn't throw a punch, but he chased a few younger lads his own age through the streets and got a buzz from it. The following year was a similar, and he ended up getting bottled by one of our own fans. He was at the front baiting the inbreds when he felt something hit him on the top of the head. He put his hand up to feel what it was, and when he looked at his hand it was covered in blood, and it wouldn't stop. He had no option but to go to hospital. Game over for him for the day. The Mackems never got over the humiliation of us taking their end in 1985. Since then, Policing at games has seen days like that confined to the history books, but we have had some notable incidents with them over the years. Sunderland is a very rough, tough place, and they have it hard down there. As a casual firm, we never really rated them until the 90s. You mainly got it with the Volks boys, but Sunderland are not up there with the likes of Manchester United. The Seaburn casuals got their act together in the mid-90s and made a few waves up and down the country and abroad with England, but they never came here to see us in Newcastle, proper mob-handed and organised without a police escort, although they claim to have done just that on more than one occasion. At the infamous Battle of Buff Lane in 1979, they only brought a pathetic 3,500 fans. They got police escorted and only fought back when they didn't really have a choice left. There are also tales of trips to Monument and Haymarket metro stations in Newcastle, where they apparently wasn't able to find our firm. These stories are a bit far-fetched, but they have to make these stories up to save face. In 1980 at Roker, the Bender boys and the Boot boys and every other nutter from Tyneside were there that day and piled off the train at Seaburn as the battle cry went up. The old Bill struggled badly with our numbers as the lads broke through their lines and battled and chased every Mackem in sight all the way to the ground. There was no CCTV in those days as well. Our favourite act was when we played them at home. Our lads used to travel to Sunderland and get on their train to travel back through to Newcastle. They would mingle in, and then, when the train was coming over the River Tyne, they would introduce themselves to the Mackems and, bosh, they hate us more than we hate them. As soon as the fixtures came out, only one mattered: Sunderland away. We were going to do them, simple as that. It was all the lads talked about. It had to be special. Some very intelligent and some very evil minds set to work to make sure of it. It just so happened that 2 weeks before the game, in April 1985, Sunderland had reached the Milk Cup final, and didn't we hear about it? Which just made it worse. It was too much to take for most of the lads, and they just had to shut those Mackems up properly. So it was decided they were going to buy 300 tickets for the Fulwell end and humiliate them in their own ground. They would remember it forever. Amazingly, the lads got the tickets. 2 and 3 mostly at a time at first, which could have potentially taken forever. But then someone thought F it, and went and asked for 100 tickets, so another person went and bought another 100. Unreal. It was agreed the lads would travel to Sunderland by metro to South Shields, then bus in 3 groups, and keep our heads down to escape the old Bill. The plan worked. It was match day, and they were at the turnstiles. Adrenaline pumping, stomachs churning, but they wasn't met by the Mackems or the old Bill, so they casually went through the turnstiles and into the ground. 15 minutes into the match was the time. Excitedly, they took to the stairs. The Fulwell end was big and full. Then, the all too familiar sound of violence. A growling sound of roar and loud in the middle of the Mackem sanctuary. Enemy, 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 enemy. Then, united. The poor Mackems didn't know what had hit them. They ran in all directions, pulling each other out of the way. Not one of the Mackems fought back. The lads were murdering them. It became a free-for-all. They wouldn't fight back. They just tried to get away in sheer panic, like they didn't know what a fight was. Well, that was what the Newcastle lads had to say about Sunderland, and that's their opinion and direct text from the Gremlins book. My opinion is that Sunderland were a very good, naughty mob back in the day, and I rated them highly, and so did most lads I know. If you have any stories to tell from the good old days, then please get in touch, and I would be happy to put your version of events in my next video. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you would like to see more, because I have many more stories to tell, then please like this video and click the subscribe logo in the bottom right of this screen. Thanks again, and see you next time.